The wind cut through the canyon like a blade that morning, and Caleb Holt had his rifle up before he even saw who was crouched beside the overturned wagon. She was Apache. That much was clear. Her dark hair was loose and tangled, her deerskin dress torn at the shoulder, and her hands were pressed flat against the dirt beside a man who was not moving. The man was Apache too. Older, a deep wound in his side that told Caleb he had been riding hard and bleeding longer than any man should. Caleb did not lower his rifle right away, not because he feared the woman, but because 2 riders had been trailing him since sunup, and a man did not survive 30 years in New Mexico territory by being careless about what was around him. He scanned the ridgeline. Nothing. He looked back at the woman. She had not run. She had not reached for anything. She sat with her hands visible and her eyes on the dying man beside her. And she did not look at Caleb with hate or fear. She looked at him the way a person looks when they are so far past hope that even the arrival of danger no longer moves them. He lowered the rifle. She finally looked up at him then. Her face was sharp-boned and sun-darkened, and there was dried blood along her jaw that was not her own. "He will not last the hour," Caleb said, not to be cruel, just because it was true and she deserved the truth more than she deserved a comfortable lie. She said something in Apache he did not fully understand. Then she said, in English that was careful and deliberate, "I know." Caleb got down from his horse. He tied the reins to the busted wheel of the wagon and crouched beside the wounded man. He pressed 2 fingers to the man's throat. The pulse was there, but thin as thread. "Your husband?" he asked. "My father," she said. He nodded. He pulled his canteen and handed it to her. She took it without hesitation, uncapped it, and pressed it to the old man's lips first. Caleb watched that and filed it away somewhere quiet inside himself. "I am Caleb Holt," he said. "I have a ranch 12 miles east. If we move him now, hard and fast, he might make it. If we stay here, he will not." She looked at him for a long moment, the kind of look that measures a man not by his words, but by the stillness behind them. "Why would you do this?" she asked. It was a fair question. It was 1874 in Lincoln County. Apache people and white ranchers did not generally haul each other toward safety. The territory had been bleeding for years, and in the ground under their boots remembered every drop. "Because I can," Caleb said, "and because standing here watching a man die when I have a wagon and a route home would sit wrong with me for the rest of my life." She held his gaze another beat. "I am Nara," she said. "His name is Daha." Caleb nodded. "All right, Nara. Help me get him up." They worked together without wasted motion. Caleb was a big man, wide through the chest and long in the arm, and he had lifted hurt cattle and fallen fence posts, and once an entire collapsed barn beam off a boy who should have died and did not. Daha was lean and tall but unconscious, and dead weight is always heavier than it looks. They got him into the back of Caleb's flatbed wagon. Nara climbed up beside him and pressed both hands over the wound to slow what was still coming out of it. Caleb climbed up front and looked back once. "Hold him still," he said. "Go," she said. He went. The 12 miles back to his ranch felt like 40. The trail was rough through the first canyon pass, and every jolt of the wagon made Nara tighten her jaw without making a sound. Caleb kept the horse moving at the fastest pace the terrain would allow, which was not fast enough, and both of them knew it. He thought about the 2 riders he had noticed behind him earlier. They had not appeared again. That was either good, or it was the kind of quiet that meant they were repositioning. He thought about what his ranch hand Lou would say when he pulled into the yard with an Apache woman and a dying Apache man in the back of the wagon. Lou would say nothing. Lou had been with Caleb for 11 years and had seen stranger things. Sauter, he thought about what his nearest neighbor, a man named Dale Pritchard, would say. Pritchard had lost a brother in a raid 3 years back, and his feelings about Apache people were not complicated or quiet. Caleb decided Pritchard did not need to know about this right away. The ranch house came into view as the sun hit its mid-morning angle, throwing long shadows off the porch and the water tower. The cattle in the south pasture did not look up. A rooster was causing trouble near the barn. Lou came out of the barn when he heard the wheels. He was a short, brown-skinned man from Texas, with a gray-streaked mustache and the unhurried walk of someone who had decided long ago that running only made problems arrive faster. He looked at the wagon. He looked at Nara. He looked at Daha. He looked at Caleb. "I'll boil water," Lou said, and went back inside. Caleb pulled up to the porch and set the brake. Nara had not moved her hands from her father's side the entire 12 miles. Her arms were shaking from the effort and the cold, but she had not moved them. "We're going to need to bring him inside," Caleb said, "and I need to tell you something before we do." She looked at him. "The wound needs to be cleaned and packed. It is going to hurt him. And if there is anything on him, any wrapping, any clothing over it, it is going to need to come off around the wound so we can work." Her jaw tightened, not in anger, in the careful, controlled way of someone processing information and deciding how to respond to it with dignity. "Do what needs doing," she said, "but I stay in the room." "I would not have it any other way," Caleb said. And he meant it. He climbed down and went around to the back of the wagon. And together they carried Daha up the porch steps and through the front door of the ranch house, into a life none of the three of them had planned for that morning. Outside, somewhere past the tree line on the western ridge, a rider sat on a pale horse and watched the ranch house with eyes that were not friendly and had not been for a long time. The spare room at the back of Caleb's ranch house had been used for a lot of things over the years. It had been a bunk room, a storage space, a place where sick cattle dogs recovered on old blankets. And once, for 3 weeks, it had been where a drifting preacher slept after a flash flood took his camp. It was plain and clean and smelled of pine soap, and it was the best room Caleb could offer. Lou had the water boiling before they got Daha onto the bed. He had also, without being asked, laid out the ranch's medical kit on the small table beside the window. It was not much by any doctor's measure, but Caleb had kept it stocked out of hard-learned habit. Clean cloth, a bottle of carbolic, thread, and a curved needle. A tin of dried yarrow his grandmother had sworn by and that he had never stopped carrying. Nara stood at the head of the bed, with her father's hand in both of hers. She had not said much since they came through the door. She watched everything with those dark, measuring eyes, tracking where Lou went, what Caleb touched, how things were arranged. Not suspicious. Just a woman making sure she understood the landscape she had walked into. Caleb did not take that personally, for she had walked into a white stranger's home in 1874 with her dying father. The measuring was not rudeness. It was survival. "I have done this before," Caleb said. "Not as a doctor, as a man who has lived far from one." He looked at her directly. "I will tell you everything I'm going to do before I do it." She studied him. "All right. The wound is deep. It was made by a blade, not a bullet. That is better in some ways. There is less to dig out. But it has been bleeding slow for a long time, and that is worse in other ways." He paused. "I need to open his shirt and the wrapping around his middle. The wound is under it." "I will do it," she said. She was already moving, her hands careful and practiced, loosening the ties at her father's collar, unwrapping the cloth around his midsection that had been pressed there as a field bandage. Oh, Caleb let her. He busied himself with the carbolic and the cloth until she stepped back. The wound was bad, not unsurvivable, but bad. It was long and diagonal across the left side below the ribs, and it had been open to the elements for too many hours. Lou leaned in once, looked, and went to add more wood to the stove without a word. Caleb cleaned his hands with carbolic and began. He worked carefully and without hurry. That was the thing about ranch work nobody told you when you were young and impatient. Everything that mattered required the same quality of attention. You could not rush a foal being born wrong. You could not rush a fence post going into rocky ground. You could not rush this. Nara stood at her father's head the entire time. Once, when Dahaz stirred and made a sound of pain, even in his unconscious state, she put her hand flat on his chest and spoke to him in Apache, low and continuous, a sound like water over flat rock. Dahaz stilled. Caleb kept working. When it was done, and the wound was packed and wrapped in clean cloth, and Dahaz's breathing had settled into something that sounded less like a door closing and more like a man simply sleeping hard, Caleb stepped back and pressed his wrist to his forehead. "He will sleep," Caleb said. "The next 12 hours will tell the story. If the fever does not climb too high, he has a real chance." Nara did not look at him right away. She looked at her father for a long moment, at the rise and fall of his chest, checking the information for herself. Then she looked at Caleb. "Thank you," she said. Just that. 2 words. But the weight behind them was considerable. "Lou will sit with him," Caleb said. "You should eat something. When did you eat last?" She opened her mouth and then closed it, which answered the question. Caleb went to the kitchen and came back with bread and dried beef and a cup of strong black coffee. He set it on the windowsill beside her and did not make a production of it. She ate standing, still watching her father, and Caleb went to the front porch because she needed space more than she needed company right now. Outside, the afternoon was deepening into the gold orange that Lincoln County did better than anywhere else on earth. The cattle had drifted back toward the water trough. The rooster had apparently resolved whatever had been bothering him earlier. Lou appeared at the door behind him. "Pritchard's hand came by while you were working," Lou said. "Boy named Ellis. Said Pritchard wants to talk to you. Said it was about the Apache trouble up near the canyon this morning." Caleb turned that over in his mind. "What did you tell him?" "Told him you were busy and would ride over tomorrow." "Good." Lou was quiet for a moment. "Caleb, Pritchard is not going to let this sit quiet. I know it. He lost his brother. I know that too." Lou shifted his weight. "What are you planning to do?" Caleb looked out at the ridge to the west, the one where, if a man had been sitting on a pale horse that morning, he would have had a clear line of sight to the ranch house. The ridge was empty now. That did not mean it was unwatched. "I am planning to keep that man alive in there," Caleb said, "and then figure out the rest one piece at a time." Lou nodded. That was the kind of answer he had come to expect from Caleb Holt. Not a grand strategy, just the next right thing in the order it needed to be done. He went back inside. Caleb stayed on the porch. After a while, he heard the door open again, and Nara came and stood beside him, not close, just present, looking out at the same ridge. "There were 3 men," she said. "They came to our camp before dawn. They killed my husband 2 days ago." Caleb went very still. "Same men who hurt your father?" "Yes." "Do you know them?" "One of them," she said. "White man, older, missing the top of his left ear." Caleb had a face in his memory that matched that description. He did not say so yet. They want something, Nara said. Not us. Something my father knows. Something about the land. Caleb looked at her. She met his gaze, and the sunset made her face look like something carved rather than born, sharp and old and certain. There is a water source, she said, on Apache land. Hidden Canyon, 3 days north. My father found it 2 seasons ago. It could feed 10 ranches. And there it was. Not just a woman and a dying man. A secret worth killing for. A piece of land that men in this territory would burn the world down to own. Who else knows he found it? Caleb asked. No one, she said. Except the men who followed us. Somewhere out past the ridge, a coyote called once and was answered by nothing. Caleb went back inside and took his rifle off the wall hook and checked the load. Lou, he called. We are going to need a night watch. The fire in the kitchen stove had burned down to coals by the time Caleb and Lou worked out a watch rotation. It was a short rotation. There were only 2 of them, and one of them was needed inside with Daha, which meant the outside fell entirely to Caleb for the first half of the night. He did not mind. He had spent more nights awake than not over the last decade of running this ranch alone, and the dark was not something that troubled him the way it troubled some men. He sat on the porch step with his rifle across his knees and the land stretching out black and silver in front of him under a 3/4 moon. Nara appeared at the door behind him around the 2nd hour. Go sleep, Caleb said without turning around. Lou is with him. You will be no use to your father if you fall over from exhaustion. She came and sat on the step beside him instead. She had a blanket around her shoulders, and she smelled of wood smoke and the carbolic they had used on Daha's wound, and something underneath all of it that was just her. I do not sleep easily in strange places, she said. Fair enough. They sat without talking for a while. The cattle were dark shapes in the south pasture. A barn owl made its business above the water tower. Your wife, Nara said. Is she here? No wife, Caleb said. Brothers? Family? A sister in Ohio. We write twice a year. It is not a close acquaintance. Nara absorbed that. You live alone here. Me and Lou. Lou is good, she said. There was approval in it. He is the best man I know, Caleb said, and meant it entirely, on another quiet stretch. The man with the missing ear, Caleb said. His name is Cole Ritter. He ran cattle east of here 3 years ago. There was a dispute over water rights. He lost. He left the county, but apparently he did not go far enough. Nara turned to look at him. You know him. I know of him. I know the kind of man he is. The kind who decides that losing a fair fight is really a wrong done to him personally, and then spends years building a case in his own head about why the world owes him something back. He killed my husband, she said. Flat, not performing grief, just stating a fact that sat in her like iron. I am sorry, Caleb said. She looked away. The blanket shifted around her shoulders. His name was Tarek, she said. He was 31 years old. He could read a trail better than anyone I've ever known. He made me laugh every single day we were together. A pause. That is who Cole Ritter killed. Caleb did not try to answer that. Some things did not need an answer. They just needed to be said into the night air by someone who would listen to them. He listened. After a while, she said, What do we do? Ritter needs that water location before your father can tell anyone else about it. That means your father is not safe here long term. We need to move him once he is stable, somewhere Ritter does not know to look. And Ritter himself? Ritter is going to come, Caleb said. Men like him always come. They cannot help it. The thing they want is close enough to smell, and that pulls them like water pulls a thirsty dog. So we wait for him to come to us. We prepare for it, Caleb said. There was a difference, often the difference mattered. Waiting is passive. Preparing means when he comes, he walks into something he did not plan for. Nara was quiet for a moment. You have done this before, she said. Not the wound cleaning. This, planning for men who come to take things. This ranch was not handed to me, Caleb said simply. She nodded slowly. Then, I can fight. I figured, he said. My father taught me. He said a woman who cannot defend herself is a gift to anyone who wants to hurt her. She paused. He was not wrong. No, Caleb said. He was not. The moon had moved a quarter of the sky by now. The night was cold and clean, and the kind of quiet that is not actually quiet, but is full of small sounds that a person has to be still enough to hear. From inside the house came Lou's low humming, like some old song without words that he sang when he was sitting with someone who was sick, as if the sound itself was medicine. You're Lou, Nara said softly. He hums. He does not know he does it, Caleb said. It is a good sound. It is. They sat another hour together on those cold porch steps, and neither of them said much more, and it was the kind of silence that is not empty. It is the kind that two people build together, brick by brick, out of the decision to simply be present without pretending anything is different from what it is. When Caleb took the second watch rotation, he found Nara already asleep on the narrow cot in the corner of the spare room, her hand resting close to her father's, and Daha's fever had not climbed. That was the first good thing. The second good thing came just before dawn, when Caleb heard hoofbeats on the south trail and recognized from their rhythm that there were 3 horses moving slow and deliberate, the way men move when they believe no one is awake to hear them coming. He was at the window with his rifle before the first horse came around the bend. 3 riders. Moonlight caught the taller one at the front. The top of his left ear was gone. Caleb stepped back from the window and went to wake Nara. The 3 riders stopped at the tree line 100 yards from the ranch house. Caleb knew that distance. He had paced it himself once, years ago, when he first built the place and was trying to work out the sight lines. At 100 yards in good moonlight, a man could see shapes and movement, but not faces. Most it was the distance you chose if you wanted to observe without being certain you were observed. He let them observe. He and Nara stood back from the windows, far enough that the light from the cooling stove did not outline them. Lou was behind the door to the spare room with Daha, and the instruction had been plain and simple. Stay with him, no matter what sounds come from the front of the house. Lou had nodded once and pulled the door shut. 3 of them, Nara said. She was close enough that her words were barely breath. She had a knife in her right hand that had appeared from somewhere in her clothing without Caleb noticing the movement. It was a good knife, old and well kept. Ritter in front, Caleb said. Yes. They are watching to see if anyone is awake. They will wait until the house goes fully dark, she said. Then they will split. One will hold the horses. The other 2 will come from different sides. How do you know that? It is what I would do, she said. Caleb filed that away. The back window in the kitchen has no lock, he said. The shutter is loose. They will find it. Let them find it. Let the one who finds it come through it, Caleb said. The other one will go to the front door. Ritter will stay back. He does not do the entering himself. He waits until the thing is done. Nara looked at him in the dimness. You have thought about this man before, she said. I have thought about men like him before, Caleb said. They are not rare. Outside, one of the horses shifted and blew a breath into the cold air. Then the three riders separated. Caleb and Nara moved, yet he went to the front room and positioned himself beside the door, in the angle where it would hide him when it opened. She went to the kitchen without being told, without a sound, sliding along the wall-like shadow. The front of the ranch house went quiet. Caleb counted his breaths. 7, 8, 9. The kitchen window shutter moved, a soft sound, the kind that sounds like wind if a man is not listening for it. Then a different sound, short and sharp, the kind a person makes when they are very surprised. Then quiet again. Caleb did not move from his position. The front door handle turned. It turned slowly, the way it turns when a person has their ear pressed to the outside and is listening for movement inside before they commit. Caleb let it turn. The door opened an inch, 2 inches. A man's boot heel appeared on the threshold, and then the man himself stepped through. And Caleb was already moving, the butt of his rifle connecting with the side of the man's head before the door had finished its swing. The man went down without grace. Caleb stepped over him and out onto the porch. Cole Ritter was sitting on his pale horse 40 yards back from the house, exactly where Caleb had expected him to be. They looked at each other across the moonlit yard. Ritter was older than Caleb had expected, somewhere north of 50, lean the way a man gets lean when he does not eat enough because he's always moving and always working an angle. The missing top of his ear was clearly visible from this distance. "Halt!" Ritter called out. His voice was steady. That was the tell. A man with a conscience would have some shake in his voice in this situation. "I am just here for the old Apache man." "You are not getting him," Caleb said. "He has something that belongs to the territory. It does not belong to you." Ritter leaned on his saddle horn with a kind of deliberate ease that was entirely performed. "I am willing to be reasonable. The old man tells me where the water is. Then I ride away, and you never see me again." "You killed her husband 2 days ago," Caleb said. Ritter's performed ease did not shift. That was a misunderstanding. Nara appeared in the doorway behind Caleb. She did not have the knife anymore. She had Caleb's second rifle, the one from the kitchen wall hook, and it was already at her shoulder. Ritter looked at her. Whatever he had expected to find at this ranch at this hour, and it was not this. The calculation on his face was brief and honest and visible from 40 yards. "There are laws in this territory," Ritter said, trying one more angle. "There are," Caleb agreed. "I suggest you go find a lawman and tell him about them." A long pause. Ritter looked at the front door, where his man was on the floor inside. He looked at the kitchen corner of the house, where his other man had not reappeared. He looked at Nara's rifle. He straightened in his saddle. "This is not finished," he said. "I know," Caleb said. Ritter turned his horse and rode back into the dark of the tree line. Caleb waited until the sound of hooves was fully gone before he lowered his rifle. Nara kept hers up for another 30 seconds. Then she lowered it. "The one in the kitchen?" Caleb asked. "Miku tied and sitting against the water barrel," she said. "He is not hurt badly." "And the one in the doorway?" "Breathing," she said, glancing down at the man Caleb had put on the floor. Caleb dragged the man off the porch by his collar and tied him to the porch post. He went inside. Lou opened the spare room door 3 inches and looked out. "Done?" Lou asked. "For tonight," Caleb said. Lou opened the door the rest of the way. Behind him, Daha lay still breathing on the cot, and the lamplight was warm and orange on his face, and his color looked better than it had 12 hours ago. Fever broke an hour ago, Lou said. He woke up once, asked for water, drank it. Lou allowed himself a small smile under the gray mustache. I believe he's going to live. The morning came in cold and silver, the kind that burns off fast once the sun gets above the canyon rim, but bites hard until it does. Caleb sat in the kitchen with 2 tin cups of coffee on the table and waited. Nara came in from the spare room and sat across from him. She wrapped her hands around the cup and looked at the steam rising off it, and did not speak for a full minute. He knows who you are, she said finally. My father. He woke again an hour ago, and I told him what you did. He asked me your name and your face. And he said he wants to speak with you. She paused. That is not a small thing. I will go when you are ready. She looked at him for a moment over her cup. Why did you do all of this, Caleb Holt? The true reason. Not the good man answer. It was a direct question, and she asked it without apology. Caleb thought about it honestly, on the way the question deserved. Because the first thing I saw was your hands on your father's wound, he said. 12 miles of rough trail, and your hands never moved. That told me what kind of person you were. And I decided that kind of person deserved better than dying in a canyon ditch. She was quiet. That is the true answer, he said. She nodded slowly. It is a good answer. She stood, and he followed her to the spare room, where Daha lay propped on a folded blanket, awake and watching the door with dark eyes that were sunken from blood loss and fever, but were entirely alert. He looked at Caleb. Caleb stood in the doorway and did not say anything. Sometimes the right thing is to let the other person set the terms. Daha spoke in Apache, slowly. Nara translated without inflection, carrying the words straight. Nate, he says you took a stranger into your house and bled yourself dry trying to keep him alive for reasons that had nothing to do with your own interest. Caleb said nothing. He says in his experience, there are 2 kinds of men who do that. The ones who want something from it later, and the ones who simply cannot live with themselves if they do not. He has had a long life to learn the difference, Caleb said. Nara translated. Daha's eyes moved and something shifted in them. He spoke again. He says yes, Nara said. And he says he has been looking at your face while you stood in that doorway, and he knows which kind you are. Caleb looked at the old man. Daha held his gaze steadily. What do we do about Ritter? Caleb asked. He will not stop. Men like him never stop until something stops them. Nara translated. Daha answered at some length, and his voice even weakened as it was carried weight. He says there is a man in Santa Fe, a federal deputy named Arthur Cross. My father gave him information once about a land fraud case 3 years ago, and Cross acted on it and acted honestly. My father believes he will act on this. Getting to Santa Fe is 3 days' ride, Caleb said. I know, Nara said. Ritter will be watching the trails. I know. And your father cannot be moved for at least 2 more days. She looked at him calmly. I am aware of all of this. I am going to send Lou to Santa Fe today, Caleb said. Lou knows back routes through the mesa that Ritter's men will not know. He can be there and back in 5 days if the weather holds. Nara turned and translated for Daha. Daha looked at Caleb again. Then he said something brief. He says, Nara translated, and then paused for a moment, something shifting in her own expression. He says to tell you that you have acted with the honor that this land used to know before it forgot how. Caleb stood with that for a moment. Tell him the land has not entirely forgotten, he said. She translated. Daha closed his eyes, not in pain or defeat, in the careful, deliberate way of a man who has said what needed to be said and is now conserving his strength for the rest. Lou left for Santa Fe within the hour, with a written account of everything in his coat pocket and the name Arthur Cross written on a piece of paper he tucked inside his boot. Caleb watched him ride out until the trail bent and the dust settled. Then he went back inside. Nara was at the window. She had traded the oversized borrowed shirt she had been wearing for her own repaired dress, which she had mended in the early morning hours with thread from Caleb's kit. It was still torn at the shoulder, but neatly so. The kind of mending that is practical rather than pretty, and is better for it. 5 days is a long time, she said. It is, Caleb said. But we have walls, and we have rifles, and we have the 2 men Ritter left behind, who are going to tell us a fair amount about his operation once they decide talking is in their interest. She glanced at him. You think they will talk? I think men who ride for someone else's agenda are never as committed to it as the man with the agenda, Caleb said. One night tied to a porch post changes a man's perspective on his loyalties. One corner of her mouth moved, not quite a smile, something more controlled than that, but in the same family. You are not what I expected, she said. What did you expect? Someone who would help from a distance, she said. Someone who would put us in a barn. Caleb looked at her steadily. This was never a barn situation, he said. And then, because the morning had been long and the coffee was cold and there was work to do, he went to check on the 2 tied men and think about what 5 days of waiting looked like when the man you were waiting on was Cole Ritter and the thing you were protecting was worth killing for. Outside, the sun had finally come up over the canyon rim. The land went gold and wide and clean all the way to the horizon. And somewhere in all that space, Lou was riding hard toward Santa Fe, carrying the kind of truth that does not stay buried, on behalf of a family that had carried enough weight already. It was enough for now. It would have to be.